Welcome. Most people work their entire lives and still remain poor, not because they're lazy, not because they're stupid, but because they were taught the wrong game and told it was the only path. They followed the rules. Go to school, get a good job, work hard, save, retire, and yet their bank accounts stay empty. Their dreams stay small, and they live quietly in fear, afraid of bills, afraid of risk, afraid of change. But what if the real problem isn't how hard you work? It's what you were taught to believe about money. What you're about to hear is not just a book summary, that it's a wake-up call. Based on one of the most powerful financial books ever written, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. This audiobook-style guide will flip everything you thought you knew about wealth.so. If you've ever felt stuck, tired of surviving, and ready to finally break free from the system that's failing you, then stay with me, because the rich don't work for money. They make money work for them. And so can you. Most people spend their entire lives working for money, yet remain stuck in a cycle of debt, bills, and financial struggle. They wake up early, follow routines, stay loyal to their jobs, and do everything they were told would lead to success. Still, they retire broke. The problem isn't that they lack effort. The problem is that they were taught the wrong formula from a young age. Robert Kiyosaki was exposed to two very different perspectives on money. One came from his biological father, whom he calls his poor dad, a highly educated man with a strong academic background, a steady government job, and conventional beliefs about money and success. The other was the father of his best friend, his rich dad, a man with limited formal education but extraordinary financial intelligence and wealth. These two men taught Robert very different lessons about money, work, and life. And this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, is a reflection of the wisdom and contradictions he experienced growing up under both influences. Poor Dad believed in the traditional path: go to school, get good grades, secure a job, work hard, climb the ladder, and retire with a pension. He thought job security was the ultimate goal and that money should be approached cautiously, with fear and careful saving. Rich Dad, however, believed that job security was a trap, that money should be understood and mastered, not feared. He believed in building assets, taking calculated risks, and using money as a tool to create more wealth. The central idea in Rich Dad, Poor Dad is this: the rich don't work for money. The poor and middle class do. But the rich make money work for them. That one idea, repeated and unpacked in various ways, forms the backbone of this entire philosophy. When Robert was just 9 years old, he asked both his dads how to become rich. Poor Dad told him to study hard so he could find a good job at a reputable company. Rich Dad, on the other hand, invited him to learn how money works. He didn't offer a job. He offered financial education. He believed that if you want to be truly rich, you must learn how to invest, build businesses, and understand the principles of cash flow. Most people confuse their profession with their business. For example, a doctor might say, "I'm in the business of medicine," but if she works for a hospital, she is actually an employee. The hospital is in the business of medicine. Her profession is medicine, but her income depends on a paycheck. Rich Dad taught Robert that to be rich, one must mind their own business, meaning build and grow their own asset column. Assets are things that put money in your pocket, whether you work or not. These include real estate, stocks, businesses, intellectual property, and anything else that generates income passively. Poor Dad believed in saving money, reducing expenses, and living below your means. Rich Dad believed in expanding your means by creating more income-producing assets. Poor Dad feared debt and thought it was dangerous. Rich Dad used debt as a tool, a lever to acquire income-producing assets that eventually paid for themselves and created more wealth. The difference wasn't in how much money they had, but in how they thought about money. One of the biggest takeaways from Rich Dad, Poor Dad is the concept of financial education. Robert writes that we are taught math, science, history, and language in school, but never how to manage our finances. Most schools don't teach the difference between assets and liabilities. They don't teach how to read a balance sheet, how to invest, how to build a business, or how taxes work. And yet, these are the very tools that determine financial success. In the real world, the rich become richer because they understand these principles. They know how to manage cash flow, how to reduce tax burdens legally, and how to grow their wealth with compound interest and reinvestment. The poor, on the other hand, often stay poor because they rely on earned income, wages, and then spend that income on liabilities they think are assets. A big house, a new car, a fancy vacation, none of these things make money. In fact, they often take money out of your pocket through maintenance, loans, and interest. One of Rich Dad's core teachings was this: assets feed you, liabilities eat you. If you want to become financially free, your goal should be to accumulate enough assets that they cover your expenses. Once your passive income exceeds your monthly costs, you're no longer working for money. Your money is working for you. That's financial independence. Another critical lesson is about mindset. Poor Dad saw money as something to be saved and protected. Rich Dad saw it as a tool to be used and multiplied. He encouraged Robert to take risks, to make mistakes, and to learn from failures. He believed that playing it safe often leads to mediocrity. While Poor Dad focused on avoiding debt, Rich Dad focused on leveraging it. While Poor Dad wanted his son to become a government employee, Rich Dad wanted his son to become financially free. Many people live in financial fear. They're afraid of losing their jobs, missing payments, or not having enough to retire. But fear is not the problem. It's how people respond to fear that matters. Poor Dad let fear control his actions. He stayed in a job he didn't like, played by the rules, and hoped for the best. Rich Dad acknowledged the fear but responded with knowledge and courage. He knew that financial intelligence could overcome fear, that a common trap is working for money instead of having money work for you. When you work for money, you're trading time for income. But time is limited. There's only so much of it. And if your income is tied to your time, you'll always be limited in how much you can earn. Rich people escape this trap by building systems, investments, businesses, intellectual property that generate income even when they're asleep. Robert also highlights the importance of learning to sell and market. No matter what your product is, whether it's real estate, books, ideas, or services, your ability to communicate value determines your success. Rich Dad encouraged Robert to take jobs that built skills, not just paid bills. He worked in sales not because he wanted to be a salesman forever, but because it taught him persuasion, communication, and the psychology of money. Rich people are constantly learning. They attend seminars, read books, study markets, and surround themselves with mentors. They don't wait for the school system to teach them. They take responsibility for their own education. Poor people often believe they are done learning once they graduate. Rich people know that learning is a lifelong pursuit. Another key theme in the book is taxes. Rich Dad taught Robert how taxes work, not just for employees, but for businesses and investors. The rich pay less in taxes not because they're cheating, but because they understand the system. They use corporations, deductions, and investments that are incentivized by the government. Meanwhile, the middle class often carries the highest tax burden because they earn wages, which are taxed at the highest rates, and they don't have the knowledge or structures to minimize those taxes. Robert also discusses the power of starting young. The earlier you learn about money, the more time you have for your assets to grow. Compound interest, passive income, and appreciation all take time, and starting early gives you a huge advantage. But even if you're starting late, the key is to start now. Waiting for the perfect moment is a poor person's habit. Rich Dad believed that action beats inaction every time. In the end, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is not just about getting rich. It's about financial freedom. It's about breaking free from the paycheck to paycheck grind. It's about creating a life where your choices are not controlled by money, but supported by it. It's about having time to do what you love, help others, travel the world, or simply live peacefully without financial stress. That it's not an easy road. It requires discipline, self-education, delayed gratification, and sometimes going against the crowd. But the rewards are worth it. Freedom, peace, confidence, and legacy. These are the real outcomes of financial intelligence. Robert ends with a powerful idea. The single most powerful asset we all have is our mind. If trained well, it can create enormous wealth. But if trained poorly, it can lead to poverty and limitation. The choice is ours. So as you reflect on your own financial journey, ask yourself, which voice have you been listening to? Your rich dad or your poor dad? Are you working for money, or is your money working for you? And most importantly, what will you do with this knowledge now?